Here's an old computer from about 1999. It's a compact iPac, small form factor tower with a 1 GHz Pentium 3 processor and 512 MB of RAM. Now, what you might not expect in a machine this old is that it is running Windows 7. As you can see, it's actually Windows 7 Starter, which is the operating system you typically find installed on a netbook. Obviously, this computer is a lot older and slower than the netbook, which is hilariously obvious because as you can see here, Windows 7 doesn't even recognize the processor, so it just lists the CPU ID here on the screen. The Windows Experience Index only rates the processor at a 1.4, which like I said, is a Coppermine Pentium 3 clocked at 1 GHz with a 133 MHz bus and 256K level 2 cache. The memory gets a 1.5, which is pretty accurate because the memory is only PC133 SD RAM. The graphics score a 1.0 because I had to install the XPDM class Windows XP compatible driver for the integrated Intel 810 in compatibility mode. If you wanted Windows Aero transparency, you would have to install a WDDM compliant video card, which is impossible on this computer as it doesn't have an expansion slots. With the hardware out of the way, how usable is Windows 7 on a computer like this? Before we open up a web browser, let's first check how much of the 512 MB of RAM is being used. You can see that we're using about half the total physical memory just at the desktop, which on this computer is limited to 512 megs because that is the maximum the Intel 810 chipset supports. That being said, let's go ahead and open up Firefox and see how long that takes. Now this hard drive is an old 5400 RPM parallel ATA drive with a bunch of reallocated sectors, but as you can see here in the task manager, the CPU is an obvious bottleneck in this situation. However, it's actually not doing too terribly so far as our homepage is loading up slowly, but as you can see, we're starting to use up our mediocre amount of memory as we're about to start heading to the page file. And yes, this is the latest version of Mozilla Firefox. It's actually the extended support release branch, which is the version we use at work. In fact, I believe this is the only branch of Firefox that still supports processors that don't support the SSE2 instruction set, such as the Pentium 3. Alright, next let's try going to a heavier website, for example Twitter. Now the normal version of Twitter does work on this computer, I've tried it before, but it's quite slow. I tried TweetDeck, which is the Twitter client that I normally use, and that was actually a lot faster even though TweetDeck has multiple timelines that synchronize constantly. Right now the machine is definitely starting to swap the virtual memory because it's pretty much out of physical memory at this point. Firefox tends to want to crash when this happens, so you have to be careful not to click on anything while the system hits the page file. Now the CPU usage has gone down, so let's try to tweet something on Twitter. And yes, by the time I would have tweeted this, I would have started recording this video already. But it definitely seems to have worked. Excellent. Obviously, the next question is whether or not we can watch YouTube, and to be honest, probably not, or at least not with the HTML5 player. However, as the YouTube homepage loads, I can definitely tell you that normal web pages actually aren't too bad if you have enough patience. I practiced using this computer before I started recording this good take, and the key with using a computer this old online is that you have to sync up your input relative to the performance of the PC. For example, you have to wait for key elements of the web page to fully load before you try to click or type anything, and as a result, it will actually look and feel pretty smooth. But I digress. As you can see, we're going to be playing this video here that is not necessarily representative of my political views, of course, using the HTML5 player, with annotations and autoplay disabled at 144p video quality. Even so, poor performance is pretty much expected. As you can see, it's definitely not doing too well even at such a low resolution. We pretty much can't even manage the 15 frames per second at 144p resolution. And Task Manager shows us that the CPU is completely bottlenecked, as well as the fact that there is no more RAM available. This computer is definitely outmoded for YouTube playback using the HTML5 player, which requires a fast CPU and a decent amount of memory. However, this is not necessarily Windows 7's fault, as this is true on any old computer. We can actually play YouTube videos using MPlayer instead of the HTML5 player by using SM Player to directly stream the YouTube video. This computer can very easily play YouTube videos at 360p using MPlayer at 30 frames per second, as you can see here. CPU and memory usage aren't really that bad either, so yes, this computer can definitely handle standard definition video playback if you're using a native player in Windows. I'm sure DVD playback would also work, but this computer doesn't even have a DVD-ROM drive, so unless you ripped a movie, you can't really play a DVD. But at the end, I think this goes to show that Windows 7 Starter is definitely sort of usable on a computer as old as this, for basic tasks such as web browsing. I mean, it's literally over 16 years old with a Intel Pentium 3 processor and half a gig of RAM, running an operating system that came out 10 years after this computer was originally purchased. If you're looking to do something like this for yourself with a similar computer, definitely try to get at least 1 GB of RAM, which, as I mentioned earlier, isn't actually possible with a computer like this because the chipset limits the amount of installed memory to no more than 512 megabytes. Therefore, a better idea would be, although you couldn't sense it in the video, the computer was doing quite a bit of disk swapping to virtual memory in the page file due to not having enough RAM. Install either Windows XP or Windows 2000, or if you actually want to use this computer for work, lightweight Linux distributions such as Debian Wheezy LTS would run much better than Windows 7, but however, for what it is, Windows 7 running on a Pentium 3 with only 512 megs of RAM definitely exceeded my expectations. It may not be the best operating system for a system like this, but it was definitely an impressive experiment considering the age of this hardware.
The purpose of this video
Here's an old computer from about
Welcome to Chrome on Windows 10. After installing Chrome, let's make it easy to find by adding it to the taskbar and making it your default browser. We'll start by adding it to the taskbar. Since Chrome is already open, you'll see the icon in the Welcome to Chrome on Windows 10. After installing Chrome, let's make it easy to find by adding it to the taskbar and making it your default browser. We'll start by adding it to the taskbar. Since Chrome is already open, you'll see the icon in the taskbar. Simply right-click the icon and select Pin this program to taskbar. Now, let's make Chrome the default browser. First,